One of the main objectives people have on their spiritual path is to transcend their self. That can, of course, mean different things for different people. Some people mean that they gradually want to diminish their sense of self. Some people want to kill their ego all at once. And others want to see that there actually never was a separate self in the first place. But of course, all these approaches or this entire project begs the question of what the separate self is in the first place. If we're not sure about what it is, of course it's quite hard to go forward in any useful way, right? Because we're not even sure what the problem is which we're trying to fix. So, what do we mean by the separate self? This is always something I ask people if I work with them and they want to overcome this illusion of the separate self. Because different people mean very different things with it. Sometimes people tell me that they mean this thinker of their thoughts. Others say they mean this performer or doer of their actions. And then other times people seem to mean that perceiver of their perceptions, right? So right now I'm seeing, hearing, feeling something, and they want to transcend this illusion of there being a separate perceiver. And all of these inquiries make sense, of course, right? But the problem is that very often people have a kind of false expectation of where that inquiry is supposed to lead. And I suppose a somewhat controversial statement, if we are on the spiritual path, is to say that the self is actually real, but we just exaggerate it. We overemphasize the existence of the self, so to say. So what do I mean by that? Of course, in a relative sense, I can say that there is a kind of consistency to this body-mind experience. I always wake up in the same bed, in the same house, more or less. I know which are my clothes, which are my shoes. I know my personal history. If I have thoughts, they tend to have a certain kind of pattern to them, which is more or less consistent from day to day. And if I have thoughts, furthermore, it's clear to me that they are my thoughts, right? So in that sense, in a relative sense, we could say that there is a separate self, right? The problem only arises if we believe that there is some kind of stable, lasting entity in the middle of these processes which endures. This is the sense in which the self is an illusion. This feeling of identification on a relative level is not problematic at all. It's actually totally functional. Just think about it, right? So I can decide to move my arm seemingly right now, right? Of course, in an ultimate sense, there isn't some kind of real separate decider who makes that decision. But nevertheless, there is a kind of feeling, a sense that this is a volitional action. I'm performing this action out of my own will, so to say. And having this distinction, having this sense, is totally healthy and normal. I mean, if my arm would just spasm right now, uncontrollably, I want to know that this is something that I'm not doing intentionally, right? It would be quite problematic if I couldn't distinguish anymore between involuntary body movements and voluntary ones. So again, there is this kind of process of identification, this sense of belonging, which is quite functional. We're not trying to get rid of that. The problem only arises if we believe that there is some kind of stable, lasting entity here within awareness, which is performing this action. So if we think about the self not as an entity, but as a process, as a kind of dynamic coming and going, then it's actually quite unproblematic. Or furthermore, it is totally healthy. Again, the problematic thing is only this belief that something, some kind of entity, endures over the course of my life. If we actually look at it honestly, we can see that this self, so to say, is just a constant process. So right now I can use the identity of I am a psychologist, I am a husband, I am this and that, but I haven't always been these things. And furthermore, there's the possibility that I won't always be these things. So these kinds of identifications just arise depending on the conditions which are here right now. And if I believe that seeing through the illusion of the self means that the sense of relative identification completely drops, then of course I will be totally frustrated and disappointed if it doesn't happen. So the key really is to directly recognize that there isn't this lasting entity. That all there is, so to say, is this true nature, presence, flowing. It's indefinable in its essence, but nevertheless, it's totally active. And this selfing, this relative process of the self, is just part of its activity. And again, nothing wrong with that at all. So there is a difference between just being totally lost and believing in this activity of the self and recognizing true nature and then experiencing this activity of the self. If we recognize true nature, the essence of mind, if you want to call it that, then it becomes clear that this process of self is something that is just a flowing activity, and it is then experienced with a kind of lightness, spaciousness, a freedom from grasping to it. The relative identification is something that gets activated depending on the circumstances, but it's not sticky anymore. It just flows through, and depending on the situation is dropped again. This is a kind of healthy flexibility we have then. We can participate dynamically with life. We don't carry around the sense of being some kind of self which has to maintain its identity all throughout the day. No, it's just totally dynamic and depending on the circumstances. There is then this total freedom for the self to express itself just in the way that is wise and healthy and useful in any given situation. So rather than trying to get rid of this relative sense of self, see what the essence of it is. See what it's made of, right? And if we do that, then what we once believed to be so problematic is really just something to enjoy. Something that is a natural and dynamic flowing of true nature. If any part of this is confusing to you, don't hesitate to write in the comment section or use the links in the description to contact me directly. Of course, I'm trying to do my best to present these topics and these explorations in a very clear way, but it's kind of impossible to foresee every point of doubt or confusion someone might have. So a lot of times the best way is just to get in touch with me directly and see if we can work it out there. Thank you for watching, and I will see you right here next time.